In this week's readings, we read Willa Cather's A Sculptor's Funeral, which was about an artist, Harvey Maverick, who passed away and is sent back with his apprentice to his hometown in Kansas. Upon their arrival, the apprentice sees the difference in the artist and the materialistic mindset of the townspeople, so much of a difference that he doesn't really even believe that the artist could have even really came from there because there was just so much not in common. Um, Again, we find death in this story, and many of the previous stories that we've read, somebody's dying or has died, and I think death is definitely a common theme in a lot of these stories. It was also interesting to me that next week's reading, A Long Day's Journey into Night, the youngest son, Edmund, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and his mom's dad died from tuberculosis. So it's interesting that, um, you know, in this story and the next one, that's three people or three characters that have had tuberculosis. So maybe sickness or illness in that time was starting to show itself. The other reading this week was the poems by Cullen. In his poems, we see that although blacks have more rights, the view of them is pretty much still the same. Even though they're not slaves, they're still viewed as uh, unworthy, rather. Something, yeah. Um, in his poem Incident, we see that that some cases of racism weren't necessarily just in the South. Like, I think a lot of people think, well, racism was, just in the South. And in this poem, we see that it wasn't. Um, the poem's placed in Baltimore, and yet it was still normal for someone to call, like, an 8-year-old walking down the street, you know, bad names. And I think it's sad because because in it says the next 5 months that he was there in Baltimore, that the only thing that really stood out to him that he remembers are the racial comments. And yeah, it's pretty sad, and it's still an ongoing thing, not just with the black races but with all races, really. And it's just, yeah, it's probably one of those things that's probably always going to be around, and no matter how much it's tried to stop, it's always going to be there.